what are the skills, the practical skills that we need as parents of PDA children and teens to support their mental health, physical health, and nervous system well-being over the long term. So today I'm going to talk about some skills, and I'm going to start with a very basic skill and illustrate it with my experience in yoga class this morning. And then we're going to apply it to situations with our PDA children and teens. Hi, everybody. So this morning I was at yoga. I had a beautiful yoga class. I loved it. I sweat out the demons and the toxins, and I was in really good vibes. And I was laying down on my mat in Shavasana, which is where you lay at the end. Hi, everybody. At the end of the practice. And there was nice music going. And then all of a sudden I heard someone in the front row unwrapping a cough drop, and the sound startled me. And then I got really angry that someone was making noise and unwrapping a hard candy during Shavasana, because it's the sacred practice, right? And then I got mad at myself for being reactive and judgmental, because that's something that I try and work on a daily basis to bring to my life, to bring to my parenting, to teach you guys to show up in that way. But I had that reaction, right? So this is a very low stakes example where I applied what we call the sacred pause, which is just pausing for 3 to 5 seconds before we do anything and observing without judgment what's going on inside of us. So there are 3 things we can notice inside of us, and some people notice one more than another. So it's thoughts, emotions, physical sensations, okay? So for me, the first one I always notice is thoughts. They're often negative. The second is physical sensations, and then emotions come and go for me, and when they do come out, they come out strongly. Okay, so in this case, I felt nervous system activation. I had a startle reflex because I'm sensitive, and it was a sound and I wasn't expecting it. So I had that little feeling in my body. So that was a physical sensation. Then I had the subsequent thought, which was, this person is so annoying, what are they doing? And then the second arrow of judging myself for having that thought and being like, I'm not a good yogi. Then third, the emotion of annoyance. Okay, so what we can use, the practical tool of the sacred pause, which I practice all the time, is okay, I note my physical sensation, I note my thought, I note my emotion, and I'm not going to avoid that it's happening. I'm going to let it pass through, and then I'm going to let go and not make it my identity or who I am, or make myself wrong for it. Okay, so this is just a very, very simple example, hi in South Africa, of what the sacred pause is. And often when we're parenting our PDA children and teens, we have very extreme activation in our bodies. We have a surge of rage, or we have itching all over our body because our nervous system is actually reacting really strongly to controlling behavior, or their flight, fight reaction, or their freeze reaction, or quote, defiance and opposition. So we're going to feel really strong reactions in our nervous system, and this is evolutionary. Whether you're a biological parent or not, you're going to be wired for either your biological offspring or your tribe to be safe. And the reactions of our PDA children and teens are driven by the survival response. And so no matter how much our cognition is this is a nervous system disability, our nervous system is attuned to theirs, it's going to react, okay? And then if you have a neurotype like PDA yourself, it's going to be a double whammy, right? So we can just notice this and be okay, huge surge of anger. I used to grit my fists without even noticing. I would grip them, and I would have such wrist pain that I would actually have to wear wrist guards because I was having this physical reaction with the behaviors that I was experiencing. The thoughts that I would have would be very negative, very invasive, my child is a demon, he can't get, and then I would be he can't get away with this, I need to stop this, and then I would judge myself as a parent. And then the emotions, which often come up through this experience, which can range from grief to rage to resentment to despair, right? So these are, the example I give in yoga is like a very small example of like a little bit of nervous system activation, a little bit of annoyance, a little bit of a negative thought, all the way to the situations that many of us find ourselves in the trenches of like learning about PDA, trying to accommodate our kid, trying to understand their behavior through a nervous system lens. And we're trying to apply this sacred pause first to these really extreme situations. So one of the things that I encourage parents to do is to practice the sacred pause in moments that aren't feeling like life or death first, right? So like the example I gave of being in yoga and hearing someone unwrapping their wrapper for a cough drop, which is pretty innocuous. I was in a safe situation, but it's a continual practice, right? It's a skill that you develop that you can then apply to these more extreme situations where your child is screaming at you and blaming you. And of course, the first thought you're going to have, which so many of us do, is I can't let them behave like this. If they behave like this, they're never going to learn that it's inappropriate. Or more extremes, like they'll become narcissistic, abusive, or never be independent, or end up in an institution, right? 0 to 100, these thoughts. But the sacred pause allows us, as a tool, as a skill, to just notice, like, oh, thought form, like that thought passed through me. I can bless it and release it, right? Like I am observing. And then by the time you do that, often our nervous system starts to come down and we can make better decisions just from taking that sacred pause. So the sacred pause is just one of dozens of tools that I teach here on this page, but more specifically in the Paradigm Shift program, which is open for enrollment on Monday. Okay? So I want to normalize that this is a skill-based practice. Okay? So there's in the program, it's a 5A framework that we work through to get you 3 things: clarity, the skills you need, and a sense of belonging while you're practicing the skills so that you have the strength and healing vibes to do it, to make the paradigm shift, because without that, the information's not going to be sufficient, right? Of just knowing. It's the practicing. And so, for example, in the first A of the 5A framework, it is awareness. So that entire first 3 weeks that we spend together, we're just getting you clarity on exactly why your child is behaving the way that they are, what the root cause is, and understanding the deep like neurophysiology and biological responses of the nervous system, right? And that's the premise, because if we can't operate on the same premise, if we're still looking at it through a behavioral lens, it's hard to put skills into practice because we're like, these are the wrong skills, right? The next module is called acceptance, and we have a couple tools, but the primary skill or tool is cost-benefit decision making, right? And that sounds complex, but it's really not. And the tool is meant to do 2 things. First, it's helpful to get you clarity on understanding when you need to make decisions around things like screens, boundaries, school, attending things, siblings. All of those decisions are going to be very unique to your child and your situation, but the tool or the skill framework is the cost-benefit decision-making framework. So we look at the child, understand where they are in their how long the parents have been working through the PDA lens, where the child is in burnout, equilibrium, their cycle. And we look at the cost to the nervous system of the child of making a certain decision, and then the benefit. And then we do the opposite with a different decision, okay? So 2 different decisions. And then we place that within the framework of the family system, right? So we have to consider the lead parent's mental health, the finances, are there siblings involved, right? So this tool allows you to develop this skill to do this cost-benefit decision making to get you clarity on what to do in any situation. So the program is not here to be like, if this happens, you should do this. Because each family's decision is going to be different, and each family is going to have a unique path towards stability and peace. The second thing that this tool does for you is to help you radically accept the constraints of raising a child or teen with a nervous system disability, of understanding that in any given moment, you're either activating or accommodating them, and that often there aren't option C. Like, let me give you an example with a client of mine. So her son, PDA, young son, also has other things going on, including allergies. So the question for her is, how do I declutter, or should I declutter in order to, help his allergies, but at the same time, he is going to equalize and have his nervous system activated because I move things around without his consent and he doesn't want things moved. Okay, so this is a really tough situation. So what do? We go through this skill. With my help, of course, this is how you learn it, right? So it's like, okay, one choice is to leave things more cluttered and to not put things away and to not organize and not clean them up. And that means there's probably going to be more dust, a little bit more risk of allergies. And so allergies can activate his nervous system through his inflammation. However, it will not activate his PDA, threat response from a perceived loss of autonomy, right? So we have the benefit of not activating the PDA neuroception, and we have the cost of making his allergies worse. The other choice is to clean it up, which the benefit is it may improve his allergies, but he'll be activated through the perception that he didn't have choice, right? And of course, we can soften whatever decision we make to try and accommodate, right? Like, collaborate, use signals of nervous system safety, use declarative language, but ultimately a lot of this is decision making, right? So, and if the parents need to make a decision based on health that the child isn't necessarily privy to all the different facets, sometimes we can't accommodate our way out of it. The reason this tool is transformative is because she was able to see, like, option A, option B. Like, that's it. There's just two options. Neither of them is wrong. Neither of them is right. It's just these are the constraints you face. And that does a couple things. First, it clarifies for you that you're not like a turkey, as my business coach says. Like, your clients aren't turkeys, right? And I totally agree with this. It's like, it's not because you as a parent somehow haven't figured out this magical option C or haven't found the right guru or expert. It's because there's only two options, right? But we're avoiding looking at that and accepting it because it sucks, right? That sucks. It sucks that those are the only two options because you feel like you're in between a rock and a hard place. So, however, by accepting those constraints of, like, these are the two choices, over the long term, we can start to transcend those constraints. And I've seen this over and over again in my own life, in the families' lives that I've worked with over the long term. I often get, people emailing me a year later to tell me about the full transformation of their family. So that's another skill that we develop in the program. Okay, the next set of skills is module 3, which is accommodations, right? And we have 9 proactive accommodations that we practice together. We collect data. We see with your own 2 eyes how things are shifting for your child. And then we have the 3 responsive accommodations, which are diffusion, de-escalation, and risk mitigation in the case that, like, there isn't physical or psychological safety. Okay, so those are all skills that we're putting into practice. The 4th module is affirmation, where we build on the accommodations that we've learned in the previous module, and we actually start to apply them to helping your child talk about their threat response, develop a healthy self-concept, and organically and with autonomy arrive on an identity that helps to develop a positive self-concept. And many children and teens arrive on PDA or autistic. Other kids are just like, I'm just me and I don't have a neurotype identity, and that's fine, right? We're baking in autonomy to this whole process, and it's relationship based so that we're supporting them in finding what resonates for them. And then finally, the fifth module is advocacy, which again, we're applying skills like nonviolent communication, boundary setting, pruning people from your life, and recognizing why it's so hard to do this for many of us because this community is not random. The majority of the family, the parents I work with, either have severe anxiety on one end all the way up to being PDA themselves, right? And so sometimes there's a history of fawning, people-pleasing, internalized threat response, survival responses that have to do with not upsetting anybody. And so this module really addresses, like, it's not just knowing, it's like, how do we put this into practice and recognize, always going back to the sacred pause, like, oh, I'm having a nervous system response in this conversation with my kids' OT because they don't fully understand PDA and I'm trying to explain it, but I feel like I'm doing something wrong and now I feel like I'm disassociating, right? Like these are the nuances that we obviously build into the skills that we're building. So again, the Paradigm Shift program is our signature program. It's the actual opportunity for 3 months live to put everything into practice with a supportive community. And then you have lifetime access to the pre-recorded materials and you can always refer back to it. But there is an online community and I do 12 live spot coaching sessions, which means parents submit questions. And if they want to, and if time zones permit, they actually get off a call and we work through real life examples. And this has been not just helpful for parents to understand how to use the tools using the real life examples. It has also been healing for the community because they see exactly the parent going through something similar to what they've been through. And it's also an opportunity for parents to connect and support each other in an action-oriented setting rather than a support group setting, which is a great setting, but this program is really oriented towards taking action and even confronting some of our triggers so that we can move through them and get unstuck. Okay, so Monday is the last day to get on the wait list because the wait list will have first access. The wait list opens for enrollment at 11 a.m. on Monday, December 11th, and there will be 48 hours for the wait list only to enroll. And if there are spots left, we will open it up to the public. Okay, so I wanted to give you guys this announcement before the weekend starts. And feel free to drop in any questions you have about the program itself before I jump off and take my own son to his occupational therapy sesh. Okay, I'm just scrolling to see. I had someone from South Africa. Hello, hello. Oh, thanks. The sweater. Lots of people like this sweater. It's from, okay, this sweater is like 4 years old from Gap. Like it's the most generic store, right? And I just love the colors, but I wish I could say I crocheted it myself, but I'm not super crafty, even though a lot of the parents I work with are like the most crafty people. I am not. My craftiness happens in here. Thanks, Casey, for being so honest to just say how the feels are. Yeah, it's okay. My PDA child is a total demon, but I love him. So the demon that we see or feel is actually the survival threat response that all of us have when we perceive that we're under life threat. right? That's a adaptive and protective response. It feels terrible as a parent to be on the receiving end of it. But it truly is a fight-flight response that any of us would have if we perceived we were under life threat, like if we were in a car crash or someone was holding us up in a dark alley, etc. So that's how that plus EMDR therapy, like eye movement desensitization. It's like bilateral stimulation of the brain where you reprocess trauma. I actually had to like go through trauma processing about the like subconscious perception of my son being a demon when he was a baby. I had some mental health issues after birth and beyond that I've not just like in the past 5 years worked through. So there's both the cognitive awareness and then how your nervous system, if you've been through trauma, encodes it. So yes. Someone said the discount for the program. Okay, so we do have an affiliate program. So if you know someone who has taken the program that you trust, you can reach out to them and they have an affiliate link. Not everyone who is using the affiliate link, but they have, as an alumni, you have the opportunity to share a link to get $100 off for your friend, and you get a $100 gift from our company as a thank you for a referral. However, it is not meant to be shared in social media broadly. It's like only supposed to be like a true connection between someone you know and someone who's taken the program, so it can be a good fit because not everyone is fully ready for the program. And we did give out our scholarships on Wednesday, so those are no longer available. However, you can get on a scholarship application for the March cohort if that is of interest. Oh, I feel like the person who prompted me to talk about the discount like isn't even a parent of PDAers, is just like some random marketing person. Oh, give me a heart. Give me a heart if you feel like it's weird to be on social media sometimes. How can we use this when working with a professional like an OT when the child needs to follow directions for both myself and the therapist as we work together? So what we would do with the program, thank you guys, what the program does is the last module, the last 2 weeks is really understanding advocacy, but it builds on everything we've learned up until that point. And you learn how to use nonviolent communication to communicate, to make specific requests instead of like, my child's PDA, so you have to do this. It's like very specific. Like, can I make a request? When my child walks into the therapy room for the first time, can we not use a laminated set of options? Instead, allow the child to gravitate towards whatever strewed option they want. And a strewing would be included in the accommodations module. So then the therapist has the opportunity to say yes or no, okay? And then we use that as data. Did they say yes? Did they say no? And if we get only no's, then we need to take a step back and go back to the decision-making framework of the costs and the benefits of working with this therapist. And again, this is going to bring up triggers because you might not want to confront this. And then we make decisions about the next right step, seeing clearly what's actually going on. And then if necessary, we change the therapist. But only you can decide that going through the tools, right? Like the outcome for each parent is different. It's like, I would like you to think about the program kind of as like a sandbox where I'm there supporting you, and so are other coaches, and so are the other families, and I'm sort of like on the outside, and I'm going to step in once a week, and we're going to work through stuff together, but like all of the tools are strewed for you. They're in a logical sequence, but you can gravitate towards them in whatever order autonomously that you want, and you use them to make your own path, or castle, sandcastle. really whatever it is that you're building, but like it's going to look different than another parent in the same sandbox because of your constraints, who you are, your neurotype, and your specific child. Okay, so this is why in Reels and on TikToks and even on written tiles, it's very hard for me to give a blanket like you should do this. And in fact, I don't do a you should do this because I'm very committed to, and it's important to me to not be in a position of like, I'm the authority, I'm the guru, you should do this because you know better, right? That would just be repeating the same dynamics that many of us have been through with doctors, with therapists, with grandparents, whoever in your life who is judging you or evaluating you or telling you the shoulds. Like, this is an opportunity to experiment and to find your own agency and to experiment with the tools, see if they work, pick the ones you like, make your own decisions, right? And of course there's logic behind it. Like, we bring in polyvagal theory. This isn't just like random tools. There's a structure to that. I mean, that's part of my gift, is like, I'm a linear thinker, I'm organized, I bring things together, and then you use it for your own path out of the dark woods, right? Yeah. Okay, I'm just gonna see if there's any more. How can I know if my kid has PDA or ODD? So Mama Lapatrat, I actually have a couple reels and an entire podcast episode on that at Peace Parents on Spotify or Apple. So I think heading to that podcast episode and or going to the link in my bio to check out our free Clarity Masterclass, which is 70 minutes with, I think, 6 PDF downloads, specifically about understanding PDA as a neurotype. So with those 2 resources, that's where I would start. Can we sign up ahead of Monday, or is it full? Is it full and the wait list is if people drop? No, you can. Okay, so we're opening enrollment to those people who have already signed up and joined the wait list. So the wait list, you can join all the way up through Monday. And that is the link in my bio. And we're going to send out the link to actually enroll only to the wait list on Monday. And then for 48 hours, the wait list only will have the opportunity to enroll. And then if there are spots left, we'll open it to the public on the morning of the 13th. But there is an upper bound of what we can take because of the live elements, and we're a small business at this point. I hope that made sense. Is it possible that my teen has ADHD instead of PDA? I'm just not sure. Of course, anything's possible. Lots of kids have ADHD and PDA. There's lots of different reasons for demand avoidance. There's lots of different reasons for nervous system activation. I think one of the things I recommend to parents, and this is the approach we take in the paradigm shift and also in Progress with PDA, which is a lower cost workshop that's pre-recorded. What we want to do is we want to experiment with tools that are specifically designed to address the root cause of PDA, right? So like autonomy losses, equality losses, nervous system, lack of nervous system safety. Experiment with those types of accommodations and then see, like, does your teen respond differently when you use that specific PDA accommodation? And if consistently you're seeing that things are improving, you're seeing nervous system activation come down, you're seeing them open up to you a little bit more, then we can infer, oh, there is a root cause of like the nervous system being activated because of a perceived loss of autonomy, right? Whether or not you want to diagnose it is a different question. Like, diagnosis is not needed in the programs that I offer or any of the accommodations I offer. It's meant to give you tools to experiment with to get clarity on what might be causing distress, trouble with basic needs, lack of connection and engagement, and nervous system activation for your specific child. So, you know, a lot of times parents aren't entirely sure when they come into a program or even a coaching container, and that's part of what we do is like you have these 3 months to experiment through this lens to get yourself clarity, because you can see at the end of the 3 months, like, oh, all this nervous system activation came down, but they still have this generalized anxiety and worry about this specific thing. Maybe we should explore anxiety with a professional, or maybe there's still some OCD tendencies. Maybe it's both, right? But like what I say to families is that this is really an empirical question, meaning we sort of have to try stuff and collect data. And we can't always know ahead of time by like, they have this behavior, therefore they're, quote, this, right? Because there's lots of different reasons. Tired Mama Customs. Thanks for all your info. It's definitely so helpful in giving suggestions that help work through some really tough behaviors. I'm so glad. I'm so glad. What if a significant other isn't on board? How do I convince them? Okay, so one of the vibes of the program, and like my vibe as well, which actually I've seen work for a lot of families in the sense of getting on the same page, is like we just stop trying to convince, okay? So obviously there are different co-parenting dynamics, right? Like families in my programs will have like married couples on totally different pages. They'll have ex-spouses on totally different pages. And what we sort of work through with the tools is like focusing on what we can control, what's under our control, and other people's behavior, emotions, opinions are not something we can control. All we can control is ourselves. And this ties into the approach we use with our kids, right? So, you know, one of the things that I think often, not always, has supported parents to getting on the same page is the lead parent just going ahead, whether it's with the program or not, just going ahead of being like, I'm going to experiment with this and observe, like, you know, you don't have to be convinced, I'm just trying this out, right? And like, we're sort of modeling the way and learning as we go. And the more we let go of trying to control the other, there's often space for them to come more organically to like what we're doing. It's almost like we're a strewed example. Other parents, often dads, it has been helpful for some of them to have like more of the like academic, you know, researchy stuff, the logic underlying a lot of it. I do think that I have skills and a strength in that sense because of my academic background. And so sometimes that's supportive of especially a dad, a linear thinker, to get on board. But yeah, I mean, we have 2 unique logins for, I think, all of our programs that come with the purchase. So often it's like, I'm just generalizing, but this is the pattern. Like often the mom going through and like doing all the work and learning everything and applying, and then things start to improve, or the mom's starting to feel more confident, and then the dad might have their own login, and like at the end of the program they've seen some shifts and they're like, oh, I'm gonna look at this stuff. Right? And my husband actually does a dad session or a non-lead parent session, and that is supportive also because it's like the experience of the non-lead parent. Yeah. Spanglish in the South. I like that. Hello, relieved to find you. Struggling with school refusal for my 12-year-old. I saw your post on self-directed education, but I'm worried he will refuse homeschool just as much. Yeah, so that's a pattern we see. So often, like, the assumption that parents and educators have with PDA kids, especially if they have some more diagnoses like ADHD or autism, it's like, okay, the social complexities, the noise, The sensory input of a school environment is really difficult for them and causes behavior. So we're going to take them out of the school setting and do the same type of education at home where there's not as much noise and sensory input and not the complexity of the social interactions. However, what they don't realize is that what's a big part of what's activating their child's nervous system is the losses of autonomy, the lack of flexibility, the lack of a ability to perceive that they're equal to or sometimes above even the teacher, right? And so we really can't apply the same logic and structure of a school into the home setting and expect it to change, because the root cause of what's causing your child difficulty is not just sensory and it's not just social communication. So often kids or teens who have gone through some school trauma, and I know that word can be activating and triggering to you because you're like, what trauma? You know, they're just going to school and I'm a good parent. You have a roof over their head, you give them good food, you're always around, you talk to them about emotions. Like, of course you're going to be like, well, I didn't cause trauma. And you didn't. It's the fact that your child's neuroception, whenever they don't perceive on a subconscious level that they have freedom and choice, or that they're equal to or above those around them, their nervous system is going to activate. And when that's repeated, it can be traumatic. And so often school is a setting that is traumatic. And so when the child comes home, there often needs to be a period of deschooling or healing, where it's like you're not working through a curriculum, and then it's a very different logic that includes more child-led learning. Okay, so this isn't my specific area of expertise, which is because I unschooled my son unintentionally because he couldn't access the public school for 1.5 years. But we're actually bringing in an expert, the 90-minute school day, whose primary expertise is self-directed education in the home. And the name of her handle lets you know that it can be accomplished in 90 minutes a day. And so she's going to speak to that as a guest expert in our Paradigm Shift program for the next cohort. But you can also look to her for more concrete examples of that specific topic. What about figuring out if your child is PDA or if your child has autism with extreme demand avoidance? I also have a podcast on that. So there's a podcast episode for the At Peace Parents podcast on, is it PDA or is it non-PDA autism with demand avoidance? So I would start there. My son, aged 4, autistic, is recovering after burnout, but in many ways he's getting worse. Have you experienced this before? We have used methods you mentioned for years. Yeah, so I would need to know more about that case. It's also quite young. Like, I would, if we were on a call together, I would want to, and in coaching we have like a whole intake process, but like, if we were in the Paradigm Shift program, I would first ask, like, can you give me a little bit more information about the timeline of how long you've known about PDA and, you know, what you've been doing for what period of time? Did he go through ABA? Did he go through traditional parenting? Did he go through an abrupt transition to school? Is that what caused the burnout? And then we would explore how recently you've made big changes and understand what's going on through your description. And then we look at indicators of what we mean by worse, right? So often parents, myself included, feel like things are getting worse because they're equalizing more potentially, or they won't follow rules, they're not complying, they won't engage in learning, etc. But what we really want to look at is basic needs access, indicators of connection, and nervous system activation. So that's something I teach in the Progress with PDA and the Paradigm Shift. And you would be tracking that over a period of months to help us understand why and on what dimensions things might be getting worse. So again, like, I never give a blanket answer because, as I've said before, these are like the skills that we're bringing to your specific family rather than an answer that's blanket and unchanging for every family with a PDA kid, because it just doesn't work like that, right? Like every family is so different. Do you have a program or a guide on explaining PDA to your child and accepting themselves for who they are? That is what I teach in the fourth module called Affirmation in the Paradigm Shift program, and we spend 2 weeks live working on that. If anxiety is the basis for nervous system being triggered, can you work through an anxiety aspect and make a difference that way? Okay, let me just clarify a little bit of the difference between anxiety and a trauma response, okay? So anxiety is based on perception, which is conscious, right? And it's often accompanied by rumination, worrying, cognition, right? And so often approaches based in cognition to counter worrying, like cognitive behavioral therapy, exposure therapy, helping us move through a sticky brain and confronting our anxieties, understanding them, work, right? I know, I have a history of panic disorder, I have lots of anxiety, I've done all these things, okay? It works very well. I'm not against it. However, what's unique about the PDA brain is that it's neuroception, not perception. What's the difference? According to Dr. Stephen Porges, who's the father of polyvagal theory, it's not under our conscious control. So we could even be enjoying something and not worrying about it at all, and perceiving threat because of the losses of autonomy and equality that our survival brain is perceiving. And so what's happening? Our frontal lobe is actually having a great time. Maybe like my son, he's at football practice. He loves it. He doesn't worry about it in terms of cognition and anxiety. However, his brain perceives threat throughout the practice because he doesn't get the ball first. He has to wait in line. He isn't as fast as the other kid. The scrimmage team loses. And what happens? Physiologically, he's having a panic response in his body. It builds in the system and it starts to impact basic needs, engagement, connection, and behavior. Okay, so what we have to be very, very careful of is treating that neuroception and a nervous system response that builds in the system to impact and disable us or our kids from basic needs, and treat it through a trauma-informed and root cause lens, not an exposure lens, because it can actually drive the child deeper into the panic response. Okay, so I am going to sign off because I have to get my son to his occupational therapy, speaking of, and I hope that you guys join the wait list. I hope that I see you on the inside of the Paradigm Shift program, either this time in January or in March or in a future date. But whether or not you ever join, I'm just happy you're here on social media with me, and I appreciate you guys being such a cool community. All right, guys, have a good day.